The human experience is defined by the connections we build, not just with the people who share our daily lives, but with the voices, faces, and creative minds that shape our culture from afar. Every generation has its anchors, those artistic figures whose work serves as the background music to our personal triumphs, the cinematic comfort during our darkest hours, or the raw poetic voice that gives form to our deepest unspoken emotions. We invite you into a collective space of remembrance today, a journey through the moments that froze time, and if you find solace in these shared human experiences, we kindly invite you to subscribe to our channel and join our community as we explore the stories that define us. The relationship between an audience and an artist is an extraordinary phenomenon, built entirely on trust, vulnerability, and shared imagination. We welcome these individuals into our homes through television screens, carry their melodies in our headphones during solitary walks, and allow their performances to alter our worldview in the quiet darkness of movie theaters. Because this bond is so deeply woven into the fabric of our personal development, the sudden severance of that connection ripples across the globe in a wave of profound, collective disbelief. It is a strange aspect of modern existence that the passing of someone we have never met in person can leave an emotional void so vast, shifting the atmosphere of an entire day and forcing us to confront the fragile nature of our own reality. The digital landscape has fundamentally altered how we grieve, turning what used to be a private moment of sorrow into a massive interconnected network of shared memory where millions of strangers find themselves grieving together in real time. Recently, an engaging conversation emerged on a popular internet forum when an insightful observer posed a deceptively simple question to the global community, asking people to recall the exact celebrity death headline that left them so thoroughly stunned they found themselves repeatedly checking multiple news sources just to verify if the information was true. This inquiry quickly transformed into an emotional archive of collective trauma, drawing thousands of deeply moving responses from ordinary people all over the world who recalled the precise moment their reality fractured under the weight of an unexpected headline. The resulting tapestry of memories illustrates that these public figures are never just entertainers, but rather milestones in our own lives, markers of specific eras and symbols of our youth. The initial shock of an unexpected loss often manifests as a refusal to accept the reality of the printed word, driving people to scroll frantically through different media outlets, hoping against hope that the initial report was merely a cruel internet hoax or a terrible misunderstanding. This shared experience of denial is a natural psychological shield against a reality that feels too abrupt to comprehend, as the mind struggles to reconcile the vibrant, larger-than-life energy of a beloved figure with the sudden finality of their absence. As we begin to peel back the layers of these shared recollections, we find ourselves transported to specific moments in time, sitting at kitchen tables, driving on morning commutes, or standing in crowded public spaces when the world suddenly seemed to lose a bit of its color. The stories shared by everyday people reveal a deep, underlying truth about the power of artistry, showing that when an icon leaves us, a small piece of our own personal history seems to vanish along with them. This exploration is not merely a rehearsal of tragedy, but a profound testament to the lasting impact of creative souls who poured their hearts into their craft, leaving behind a legacy that continues to resonate across oceans and generations. In this opening chapter of our reflection, we look at how these shocking announcements disrupt the rhythm of daily life, arriving without warning and leaving an indelible mark on the consciousness of the public. The stories told by those who experience these moments firsthand are filled with a sense of atmospheric shift, describing how a normal, mundane afternoon can be instantly transformed into a historical marker in an individual's life journey. From the quiet realization in a local coffee shop to the chaotic burst of a breaking news alert on a car radio, these moments of departure bind us together in a unique form of modern folklore. We examine how these narratives begin, focusing on the initial waves of confusion and disbelief that ripple through the public before the full weight of the loss is completely understood. The sense of vulnerability that follows such news reminds us of the unspoken agreement between the artist and the admirer, a bond that remains unbroken even when the voice is silenced. By examining these moments of initial impact, we begin to understand the true scale of the imprint left by those who dedicate their lives to expression, storytelling, and music. The quiet before the storm of global mourning is characterized by a strange suspended animation where individuals try to make sense of the incomprehensible, reaching out to friends, refreshing feeds, and looking for any sign that the news might not be real. This collective pause, this universal intake of breath, is where our story begins, setting the stage for a deeper look into the lives that touched millions and the headlines that changed everything. As we prepare to delve deeper into the specific accounts and the legendary figures who define these moments, we reflect on the fragile, beautiful ways that human lives intersect through art, media, and shared experience. The resonance of these departures stays with us, shaping how we remember the past and how we appreciate the creative voices still with us today, reminding us to cherish the art that connects us all. The transition from initial disbelief to the heavy acceptance of reality marks the moment where personal sorrow integrates into a broader public narrative. When a headline flashes across a screen, the immediate instinct of the human mind is to seek a corroboration, to find alternative perspectives that might offer a different, more comforting conclusion. The stories shared by individuals across the globe reflect this exact pattern of frantic verification, a digital pilgrimage from one news outlet to another in a desperate bid to find a retraction. This phase of the experience is defined by an escalating tension as the realization sets in that the vibrant voice or compelling screen presence we grew to rely upon has truly been silenced forever. The weight of these moments is often amplified by the specific circumstances of our own lives when the news breaks, creating a permanent mental link between a physical location, a mundane activity, and the sudden departure of a cultural icon. For a devoted follower of the arts, learning of the passing of a masterful performer like Philip Seymour Hoffman did not just signify the end of a brilliant career, but the closing of a unique chapter in cinematic storytelling. His extraordinary ability to embody the complex, often flawed depths of the human condition meant that his audience did not merely watch him act, they felt the raw intensity of his characters. In regions far from Hollywood, such as the vast landscapes of Canada, the announcement of his departure seemed to coincide with the fading presence of cultural touchstones like Much Music, marking a double loss that signaled the end of a specific era of youthful media consumption. This intersection of personal nostalgia and public loss illustrates how deeply embedded these figures are in our own timelines, acting as anchors for our memories of growing up. Similarly, the music community experienced a profound, almost eerie awakening with the passing of David Bowie, an artist who treated his entire existence, including his departure, as a grand piece of performance art. For those tasked with reviewing his final creative offering, Black Star, the music initially sounded like a hauntingly beautiful, deeply mysterious experimentation. Yet, when the news of his death broke just days later, the intricate lyricism and somber tones of the album suddenly transformed into a deliberate, brilliant farewell address to the world. The immediate realization that an artist had choreographed his own exit through his craft added a layer of profound solemnity to the listening experience, turning a standard critical review into an emotional encounter with a creative genius who understood his time was short. The shocking nature of these events often stems from their complete unexpectedness, leaving the public to grapple with a reality that feels entirely unscripted and inherently tragic. The sudden loss of Liam Payne sent shockwaves through a generation that had watched him rise from an ambitious teenager on a television singing competition to a member of one of the most successful musical groups of the modern era. The narrative surrounding his final days was filled with a poignant complexity that left fans worldwide feeling a deep, lingering sadness, as they tried to reconcile the joyous melodies of their youth with the heavy reality of his untimely passing. In another corner of popular culture, fans of the iconic television series Buffy the Vampire Slayer found themselves facing an unexpected sorrow with reports concerning Anthony Stewart Head. For viewers immersed in the final seasons of that definitive narrative, the beloved figure of Giles represented a steady paternal presence, and learning of his passing cast a bittersweet shadow over the remaining episodes, proving that the characters we love carry an even greater weight when we learn of the real-world vulnerabilities of the actors who portray them. The domestic spaces of our youth are frequently populated by these figures, making their sudden absence feel like a breach of personal security, a sudden intrusion of mortality into our safest memories. Consider the young barista, a lifelong devotee of the Star Wars universe and a dedicated cosplayer, who overheard casual chatter in a busy cafe about the passing of the woman who brought Princess Leia to life. For that young woman, Carrie Fisher was not just an actress in a sci-fi franchise, but a symbol of strength, independence, and personal identity. To hear such devastating news delivered casually by strangers, and to then have to seek the privacy of a quiet moment to confirm the headline and shed tears, highlights the deeply personal nature of public grief. This contrast between the cold, objective delivery of news and the intense subjective reaction of the individual underscores the unique power of modern celebrity culture. The timing of a departure can also add a cruel irony to the narrative, as was the case with the beloved Betty White, whose passing occurred just mere weeks before she was set to celebrate her monumental 100th birthday. The global community had spent months anticipating this historic milestone, with massive celebrations, media specials, and public tributes already meticulously planned. The sudden announcement of her death, right at the threshold of this centenary, felt like a collective theft, transforming what was supposed to be a universal celebration of longevity and joy into a sudden, nationwide moment of mourning for a woman who had spent decades bringing laughter into our living rooms. The sheer weight of these narratives often lies in the tragic imagery they leave behind, images that imprint themselves onto the public consciousness and refuse to fade. The heartbreaking circumstances surrounding the drowning of Naya Rivera offer a vivid example of a tragedy that transcends the boundaries of ordinary celebrity gossip. The agonizing realization that her final moments were spent in a heroic, exhausting effort to save her young child, successfully ensuring his safety before she was pulled beneath the water herself, is a narrative of maternal devotion so profoundly moving that it continues to evoke tears from people who only knew her through her vibrant television performances. The sheer bravery mixed with the absolute tragedy of the event creates an emotional resonance that lingers long after the news cycle has moved on to other topics. In a similar vein of shock, the passing of Chadwick Boseman left the world entirely paralyzed with disbelief, largely because he had kept his severe health battles completely shielded from the public eye. For a dedicated follower of the cinematic universes he inhabited, receiving a text message about the death of the man who embodied the noble king of Wakanda felt like an impossibility, because he had continued to deliver powerful, physically demanding performances. While silently enduring immense personal suffering, the revelation of his death was accompanied by a wave of profound reverence for his strength, changing how audiences would forever view his artistic legacy. The cultural landmarks of our teenage years hold a permanent place in our emotional development, making the loss of musicians like Chester Bennington feel like a direct assault on our own past. For a generation that grew up using the cathartic, raw vocal performances of Linkin Park to navigate the turbulent waters of youth, Sint was more than a lead singer, he was a vital emotional outlet. Hearing that he was gone forced millions of adults to confront the hidden pain behind the music that had saved them, making it one of the first public deaths that truly penetrated their adult consciousness. This sense of lost innocence is a recurring theme, echoing through the memories of those who adored Cory Monteith during the height of the Glee phenomenon. For young viewers, the show was a weekly escape, and the sudden tragic loss of its central male lead felt like the abrupt shattering of a safe, colorful world, forcing a young audience to confront the harsh realities of addiction and mortality far earlier than they ever expected. The delivery mechanism of the news itself often dictates the texture of the memory, whether it is an unexpected announcement over a car radio during a routine morning commute or a text message in the middle of a busy workday. Hearing of the sudden passing of John Ritter while driving to work created a visceral, unsettling sensation of sadness for countless listeners who had grown up on his physical comedy and warm screen presence. The suddenness of his thoracic illness served as a stark reminder of how quickly a life can be altered, transforming a regular Tuesday morning into a permanent marker of grief. The world of cinema buff classic fandom experienced a similar fracturing when headlines began to circulate about the devastating loss of Diane Keaton, an actress whose career spanned from iconic, era-defining roles in the 1970s to endearing performances in her later years. For those who had tracked her artistic journey across decades, her presence felt permanent, making the news of her departure a deeply personal sorrow that reshaped their appreciation for the history of film. The trajectory of a career cut short in its absolute prime introduces a specific kind of frustration to the grief, a sense of unfulfilled potential that haunts the memory of the artist. The chaotic and mysterious circumstances surrounding Brittany Murphy, whose career was experiencing an explosive, versatile renaissance, left the public in a state of utter bewilderment. The initial headlines seemed completely unbelievable, as the industry struggled to understand how such a vibrant, uniquely talented young woman could vanish so suddenly from the Hollywood landscape. This bewilderment is magnified 100-fold when the loss involves acts of sudden violence against individuals of pure light, such as the tragic fate of Christina Grimmie. The haunting detail that she had opened her arms wide to welcome an admirer with a hug moments before her life was cruelly taken remains one of the most devastating symbols of innocence betrayed, leaving fans with an enduring sense of heartbreak. Even the holiday season is not immune to these sudden intrusions of tragedy, as the world learned on a Christmas morning when news broke that George Michael had passed away. For many, the initial reports felt like a deeply tasteless, unfunny holiday prank, a cruel play on his famous festive anthem. The gradual, cold realization that the legendary vocalist was truly gone cast a permanent shadow over the holiday, transforming a day of universal celebration into an anniversary of quiet mourning. The youthfulness of the victims often deepens the sense of injustice, as seen when headlines announced the passing of Michelle Trachtenberg at the age of 39. To see a performer who had been a staple of childhood television and teenage dramas pass away at such an early stage of life felt entirely wrong, prompting immediate denial and a frantic search for verification from a public that simply refused to believe a life so full of promise could be concluded so soon. The geography of grief is often defined by the specific places we find ourselves when a monumental piece of news alters our perception of the world forever. For those who happen to be walking through the historic streets of Pittsburgh, when the news broke regarding the sudden passing of Mac Miller, the loss felt intensely local, grounded in the very soil that had inspired his raw, poetic musical journey. Walking through Frick Park that evening, surrounded by the quiet rustle of autumn leaves while listening to his early mixtapes, provided a bittersweet sanctuary for fans trying to process an absence that felt entirely unexpected. The suddenness of his departure left an entire generation of listeners feeling adrift as they had watched him evolve from a carefree teenage rapper into a deeply introspective, mature artist who openly shared his internal struggles through his complex melodies. This sense of personal connection is not always easily explained by logic, as some departures simply hit different, penetrating our emotional core without a clear or obvious reason. When the culinary and television world learned of the untimely passing of Anne Burrell, a broad audience of food enthusiasts and casual viewers found themselves genuinely and deeply upset, struggling to articulate why her unique, energetic presence had left such a lasting imprint on their daily routines. It is the sudden removal of these vibrant personalities from our regular media landscapes that forces us to realize how much comfort they truly provided in our ordinary lives. The passage of time often gives us a false sense of security, leading us to believe that those who have survived long battles with illness are finally out of danger, which only intensifies the shock when the final headline arrives. The brave and public journey of Shannen Doherty had been tracked by millions who admired her resilience and unwavering spirit in the face of profound adversity. For those who had watched her iconic performances since early childhood, learning that she was suddenly gone felt like a physical blow, causing phones to drop from trembling hands as tears flowed freely for a childhood icon who had promised to stand strong against the odds. The violent and abrupt nature of certain departures introduces a unique level of trauma to the collective consciousness, shattering the illusion of safety that usually surrounds public events. The tragic fate of legendary guitarist Dimebag Darrell, delivered to a generation of high school students through early morning radio broadcasts, sent shocked teenagers racing to their family computers in a desperate bid to verify an unthinkable reality. The brutal finality of that moment, occurring live on a concert stage where he was doing what he loved most, forever altered the heavy metal community and left an enduring scar on the history of live music performance. The global sports landscape is equally vulnerable to these moments of frozen time, where a single headline can unite fierce rivals in a unified chorus of absolute disbelief. The day the world lost Kobe Bryant alongside his young daughter and their companions remains one of the most universally vivid memories of the modern era. A moment where normal conversations were instantly replaced by hysterical phone calls and choked, uncomprehending voices trying to utter the words that seemed impossible to say. The sheer magnitude of his competitive drive and his emerging second act as a mentor made his sudden departure feel like a disruption to the natural order of athletic excellence. This global outpouring of sorrow is reminiscent of earlier, historic departures that completely redefined how the world observes public mourning. Living in London during the fateful summer when Princess Diana was taken from the world offered a front-row seat to a historical phenomenon of collective grief, where the proximity to the airbase receiving her body amplified the somber atmosphere that enveloped everyday citizens for weeks on end. The ocean of flowers, the quiet streets, and the shared tears of complete strangers demonstrated that certain figures transcend the boundaries of mere celebrity, becoming symbols of a collective cultural identity. The artistic community often experiences these losses just as an individual is entering a profound creative renaissance, adding a layer of tragic irony to an already devastating situation. The sudden departure of Andre Braugher left audiences completely devastated, precisely because it felt like the world was just beginning to witness the full magnificent scope of his dramatic and comedic capabilities. His legendary status was firmly secure, yet the anticipation of what he would conquer next made his quiet exit a deeply felt loss for the future of dramatic storytelling. For those who experience these moments during the formative years of childhood, the emotional impact can shape their entire understanding of mortality. Hearing of the sudden passing of the beloved comedic genius John Candy on a national evening news broadcast drove young children into the privacy of their bedrooms to weep for a man who had brought nothing but pure joy and laughter into their young lives. This premature confrontation with the fragility of life is a powerful, defining moment that stays with an individual well into adulthood. The physical environments where we receive these shocking updates can often complicate our ability to find closure, leaving us suspended in a state of agonizing uncertainty. Sitting in the remote wilderness of northern Minnesota, with nearly non-existent cell reception, when the world learned of the tragic loss of Robin Williams created a uniquely agonizing experience for those trapped far from modern communication lines. Managing to catch a brief, fleeting headline without the ability to load the full article left individuals sitting in silence for extended periods, frantically trying to refresh their devices to confirm what felt like a cruel impossibility. The absolute refusal to believe the news is a common psychological defense mechanism, especially when the artist in question is loved for their youthful energy and transcendent talent. When the news of Heath Ledger's untimely passing began to circulate, many dedicated admirers were entirely convinced it was an elaborate internet prank or a malicious rumor, refusing to accept that a performer they had championed for years could suddenly be gone. The eventual realization that the reports were accurate cast a dark, permanent shadow over his final legendary performances, leaving audiences to wonder what heights he might have achieved. The personal routines of youth are often shattered by these unexpected announcements, turning a routine pickup from summer camp into a core memory of sorrow, as was the case for young fans who learned of the sudden passing of Bernie Mac. His unique comedic timing and warm familial television presence had made him a staple of household entertainment, and his sudden absence left a noticeable void in the landscape of American comedy. Similarly, the tragic and sudden departure of young stars like Cameron Boyce sent shockwaves through a generation of viewers who had literally grown up alongside him on their television screens. To see someone so young, vibrant, and full of philanthropic promise pass away so abruptly shook young audiences to their core, forcing them to confront the reality that youth offers no shield against the unexpected. The feeling of losing a newly discovered friend is another unique facet of public grief, particularly when an audience is just beginning to explore an artist's catalog. Discovering the innovative, smooth musical stylings of Aaliyah, only to have that discovery cut short by a tragic aviation disaster, felt like a personal betrayal of potential for millions of new followers. Tuning into music television networks only to see the somber faces of hosts confirming the devastating news solidified the heartbreak, leaving an entire industry to mourn the loss of a true pioneer who was reshaping the future of pop and rhythm and blues. In the fast-paced world of professional sports, where athletes are often viewed as symbols of peak physical endurance, a sudden medical crisis can leave fans completely paralyzed with shock. The recent, incredibly swift turn of events surrounding the elite competitor Kyle Busch illustrated how rapidly a situation can transition from a seemingly minor health issue to an absolute tragedy. Having just stood victoriously in the winner's circle only days prior, the incomprehensible progression from what was initially believed to be a routine sinus infection to a sudden, tragic conclusion left the entire racing community and sports world in a state of profound, stunned silence. This rapid escalation served as a stark, universal reminder of the unpredictable nature of our biological existence, proving that even the strongest among us are subject to the sudden whims of fate. The digital era has also introduced a unique wave of modern performance art where the lines between a public persona, an elaborate stunt, and genuine reality become incredibly blurred, making the ultimate confirmation of a tragedy difficult to process. When initial reports began to surface regarding the sudden departure of the enigmatic and eccentric artist Oliver Tree, a large portion of the public assumed it was simply another provocative marketing campaign or an edgy artistic statement designed to shock the internet. The realization that he was actually gone, that the larger-than-life character had truly left the stage for the final time, took days to fully settle into the minds of his followers, transforming their initial skepticism into a deep, lingering sense of solemn reflection. These diverse accounts of shared sorrow and digital verification weave together to form a complex, deeply moving portrait of how modern society navigates the concepts of legacy, artistry, and remembrance. The voices we lose along the way are never truly forgotten, as their creative contributions remain permanently etched into the cultural landscape, continuing to offer comfort, inspiration, and a sense of shared